Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sama Sisters Against Mental Abuse. I'm your host, Misty, and today we have on our show Tricia Diamond. She is a public administrator and she is also an educational consultant and one of my friends. How are
Yeah,
you, Tricia?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad that I made it here on time.
Yes, you did.
So I guess I would love for you to kind of just dive in. Tell us about
Okay.
you, and then kind of give us a beginning to the story that you're going to be telling us today.
Okay, great. Well, of course, my name's Tricia Diamond. I'm originally, say, from Los Angeles, but my family, my parents were both from New Orleans. Like I said, raised in Los Angeles. I attended private schools in LA. So my parents really raised us to be rather, I would say, protected from certain environments. So I went to an all girls Catholic high school, graduated. They raised us very well. However, my father and parents did not save for my education. And I tried to attend UCLA for a year, and I didn't have financial aid. It became very difficult. So I had to put those desires aside for a while. But later, I was able to finish my college education. I did that in the Netherlands. I have degrees in aerospace engineering, English, and math. And yeah, I worked as an educator in the Netherlands eventually. So I taught, and I later came back to the US in 2008. And then I decided to continue a career in education. I worked as an educational consultant, a teacher, an assistant principal at one point. But then I decided to move into public administration. And I've been working for King County for quite some time. And that's a little bit of and who I am.
Oh
On as an
wow!
aside, I also for fun, because I was able to buy a home in New Orleans to honor my parents, and I also teach dance classes. So I, for fun, I have it's called Seattle Twerk Shop. So I teach twerk and Afrobeats classes for fun.
Wow. So you are amazing,
Oh,
and
thank
I
you.
no one else knows this. But you have a PhD. Like you sound like you've done it
Well,
all. You've studied abroad, so you are an amazing woman. Like so many
okay,
of
thank
the
you.
the women in our community. So I guess where did you meet this person? Can you tell us a little bit about who this
Okay.
story is about, where you
Yes.
met him? You know.
And this story is about my ex-husband. My ex-husband I met after I'd had my first son. So my oldest son was with yeah, my ex. He is from Los Angeles, and I had my oldest son right at the time of the LA riots. Literally during the LA riots, I had him. Our relationship didn't work out, and at that time, I said, I'm going to leave the US because I can't raise my son alone here. My father, who had traveled, he also agreed that it's probably not a good idea for you to raise your son and my grandson in any event in Los Angeles. And this is back in the days of CompuServe, which was a online internet and everything. And I initially met him, I'd say online. He had asked some question about Los Angeles and, knowing a little about the Netherlands. I asked him, it was something about the weather or something, I guess. And and I told him, I had been there and everything, and my dad, what he did. And we started speaking and talking to one another. And so at this point, I still had, my youngest son, my oldest son, excuse me, and he had said that he had a child. He had a daughter from a previous relationship from a woman he hadn't married. And I went out to visit him first without my son because my parents were like, "You're not going to bring your son all the way there to meet him." And I thought we hit it off. And then he came to the United States to visit me in Los Angeles. He didn't like it at all. And um, at that point, we were like, so what are we going to do here? Because, flying back and forth for the relationship. And it was decided that because he did not like the US, that I would move to the Netherlands. And at the time, that was a really attractive idea because I also realized that, education there was much low cost as compared to the United States.
So at this point, how long at you were you in a relationship with him at this point, and how long had it been since you had been
Yes.
dating?
We had been dating a total of, I think, 7 months at this point. And that's when it was decided that, okay, you're going to move to the Netherlands. But remember, I still had my son who was, I think he was 2.5 at the time. And my mother's like, well, your son, my grandson doesn't have a passport. Let him stay with me while you go out, figure out, if you guys are going to be in a long-term relationship. But my entire family was, hey, if you're moving all the way to another country for someone, he needs to marry you because you're giving up everything for this person in his country. And he doesn't seem to be interested in engaging with us. And so I did leave. And I remember I drove my mother to New Orleans because that's, of course, where she's from. And she wanted to stay in New Orleans with my son. And that was a difficult trip to leave my son there, but I left. And at that point, I'm in a country where I'm trying to, pick up the language again. And I'm pretty isolated, like literally isolated, and not allowed much contact in terms of speaking with my family because back then calls cost per minute. And I wasn't working because I'd moved to be with him. So I quit my job and everything. And so, he was doing things like, monitoring how much money I spent because he's like, you can't call and speak to them because that costs too much money. And then it took almost a year for my son to get his passport because, of course, with dealing with his dad, ex, who then couldn't be found. And so finally got the passport, and that took over a year. So I'm having limited contact with my son by telephone with my mother, and then arranged for me to fly and pick up my son. However, at this point, I discovered that I was pregnant with my youngest son. So I flew and I met my son in New York. New York, I even said it like a New Yorker. I flew and met my son in New York, picked him up, who hadn't seen me in quite some time. He was ecstatic to see me. My mother was not so happy because she's like, I've had him for this amount of time and now you're leaving. But she was, one of her last things that she said was, I think it's strange that he hasn't really tried to call to speak to, because he's going to get to know him and everything. But he had met him once before during his trips to the US. And that's how we then ended up becoming a family. And of course, my oldest son was shocked to see that mommy has a little tummy here. And I'm explaining to him that I'm pregnant and everything. And um, I would like to say that's when things started going south, but there were some things in hindsight that I realized were not good signs that I was voluntarily entering into something that would transform into abuse.
So what were like those smaller signs, like the ones that you kind of
Oh,
just mentioned? You said in hindsight, before you were pregnant,
yes.
maybe there were things that you might have missed.
Oh, yes. There was one huge thing that my father reminded me of when I finally left him, because it took decades to leave. But when I first went out to meet him, and we went to Amsterdam, and he was showing me the city, and someone pickpocketed me on the dom. And um, this is back when there were telephones. And I went to the phone and I was calling my father to ask him to cancel my credit cards and things. And he was in the background just fussing and calling me stupid and what an idiot. And he's saying it in English. And my dad was saying, who is that talking behind you? I'm like, oh, no one's talking. He's like, yeah, there's someone talking about you behind you. Put him on the phone, put him on the phone. And I was trying to play it off like, oh, dad, he's just upset because, this is taking so much time out of our trip to the city. And he's like, put him on the phone. And I have no idea well, at that point, I had no idea. Later, my dad told me what he told him. But my father said something to my ex husband. His face completely changed. Um, hung I Then he gave me the phone back, hung up. We didn't talk about it afterwards.
I would like if you told us what your
Mhm.
dad said, but I also want to know, what do you think made you ignore that? Was it something that you were kind of used to? Have you been like verbally attacked before and you were used to it? Or do
Yes,
you think that you were so panicked in the moment that you kind of just didn't even pay attention
right.
to it?
I think this was at a time I wasn't 30 years old yet. And it was a time where I think there was big media push back then in the 90s that if you're a Black woman, you're going to end up alone. And I think I was so desperate for a relationship before I turned 30, and having had, a child already that I had not intended on being a single mother, but something happened with his dad that created that situation where he wasn't truthful. And I think I just thought that this is what a Black woman has to do in order to have a relationship. You need to put up with this because it's better to be married or aligned with someone than to be single, because I'd had that experience of what people say to you, how they treat you when they think that you're a single mom and you're Black. And I'm like, I don't want that. So I know that I ignored things on purpose, thinking that, well, I can deal with this. This is fine. So that's why I was pretending for my dad, like, oh, he's not saying, oh, it's nothing. He's just stressed. And my dad wasn't having it. And so what my dad had told him was that he later told me that he had told him that, look, I'm an old man. I've traveled the whole world. If you ever talk to my daughter that way again, I'm going to have to get on a plane and come over and kill you. And I don't care if I go to jail. So mind you, my father was never invited to come and see me the entire time that we were married. And I think that it was because they had, you know, that type of relationship that my father had addressed him that, no, you're not going to talk to my daughter this way. And so that's when the further isolation started.
Okay, so that was one of the things that you might have, one of the red flags
Mhm.
that you missed. So at
Yes.
this point, you have met online and he
Hmm.
has a child from a previous relationship. You have a
Yes.
child from a previous relationship. I think you also told me that he specifically liked Black women too.
Yes.
So I wonder like if it made you feel
Mhm.
accepted, like, okay, I can do this kind of thing. You
Yes.
were struggling with, I guess, mentally maybe the stereotypes of being like a single Black mother. So all these things were
Right.
happening and then you met him. So that might have been part of why you kind of looked past those red flags. So
Right.
when you were pregnant and then you got your oldest son and
Hmm.
you took him back with you to the Netherlands, were you
Right.
married at this point or did you get married then? Was he like,
No.
you marry me because you're pregnant kind of thing, or
No, we weren't married at that point. Marriage was a dangling carrot that he held. He finally, because it took, I think, 3 years before he finally, so I had our son, he finally asked me to marry him. And that was under conditions because I was an American citizen. One of the things he said I had to do was give up my US citizenship and then he would marry me. I'll never forget that discussion in the bedroom. And I was beside myself because I'm thinking, okay, I have to marry him. And there was another incident that I'll talk about later where I could have backed out, but I didn't, partially because of that desperation of I need to be married. I can't have two kids and be a single mom. But he said I had to give up my US citizenship in order for him to marry me. And I said, okay, because I needed to be married. So there was a period of 10 years where I was not a US citizen. So what I did is he drove me to the US Embassy in Amsterdam. The kids were in the car. So that's another thing. And I know that that was a mental tactic of having the kids in the car. You get out, you go in there, you give up your citizenship, and then you come back. I'll keep the kids here. So I'm like, why couldn't the kids go in with me? So I went in. I told the consular officer that I needed to give up my citizenship, and the officer said, well, this is something you need to make an appointment for. And so I had to make an appointment. I'm like, you don't understand. I have to give it up now. He's like, no, you make an appointment. So I told him, please write that down because my husband needs to know. And he wasn't my husband at that point. He needs to know this. So I went back to the car and explained to him that they wouldn't do it now. It's like, well, the next time when you have the appointment. So I went in the second time for the appointment, kids still in the car, same thing, walked in, and that consular officer, um, I remembered he said, I'm going to let you give up your citizenship. I'm going to give you the paperwork, but um, I'll need you to nod. Is this being done under duress? And I went like this, and he said, okay, I'm going to give you the paperwork. You're going to give up your citizenship, but I'm also going to make a notation in your file in case you ever want to get this back, come back. And
Okay,
so
so you nodded yes, that it
yes,
was been doing that you were doing
right,
under
under
duress.
duress. His
Okay, I
name was
got you.
Christopher. I forgot his last name, but he saved me, I think. But I went, gave up my citizenship. He was ecstatic. And then that's when we started planning our wedding. And I was miserable for that period of time because I know I'm stuck here now. I am now just a Dutch citizen. I can't even go to see my family without, him. Or if I go to see my family, I can't stay with them because I have to leave. But luckily, the kids were able to keep both of their passports that they said. So planned the wedding, got married. Um, the whole wedding thing was also horrible because I thought that he had said that my family was going to be there. And I remember when I walked in there, all I saw were a bunch of Dutch people. I did not see anyone who looked like me.
What? So he told you that he was inviting them or that he was flying them
Yes,
out?
that he was going to take care of that. They
Oh.
weren't there at all.
So was it just
Uh,
his family?
just his family, some of my friends that I had met there.
Mm.
But like I said, I was the only person of color other than his ex-girlfriend who also happened to be there with their child who came up to me and told me that, he said he didn't really want to marry you, but he had to
At the wedding?
at the wedding. That's what she told me
Oh
at the
no.
wedding. And I'm like, even looking back, I'm like, I was an idiot. I should have just walked away at that point, but I don't have my citizenship. I'm not an American anymore. So I'm like, well, I'm stuck here. And when I confronted him, he said, yeah, I told her that at the end. So I was like, okay. And so humiliated there, went through with the wedding. I remember I called my mother first after we had gotten married and told her that we got married, you weren't there, and she had said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be at your next wedding." And called my dad, and he said the exact same thing. I'll be at your next wedding. But I can laugh at it now, but it was the most, I mean, it was like a 1-2 punch. I mean, the ex-girlfriend, she was also a constant, of course, because they had a child together too, but she would also um, do things like bring her family over, them to sit and speak in Dutch and talk about how ugly I was, or she has bad hair, all these things, not realizing that I could speak Dutch well enough that I understood every word they could say, but that they were saying about me. Um, making, she had a sister named, her name was Marilyn. She had a sister named Anushka. And I remember the two of them sitting down and talking about how ugly I was. And at one point, he told me to go and get my hair done by her. And I remember, and this is the last time I had a relaxer. She was putting the relaxer in my hair, and my then stepdaughter, who was maybe like 4 or so, was asking her, "Why are you putting that stuff in her hair?" And she's telling her in Dutch, "It's because her hair is so bad and she needs to have this. You're lucky that your hair is good and you don't have to do it." And again, I'm isolated, and it was just like I didn't realize, I didn't see these things as abuse. I just saw it as more, okay, this is what you have to go through to be married. The worst part, so then things of course would escalate. The thing that he used to do that really, even today, that I have problems reacting to, he would do this thing where if he disagreed with you, or you were saying something he didn't like, he would never hit, he would pull the fist back and act like he was going to hit you, and then laugh about, oh, I wasn't going to hit you. Why are you flinching? Why are you doing that? And that went on for years. But even today, if people start raising their, well, I have to consciously calm myself down, or if they're even pretending like they're going to, I'm like, don't, you can't make that type of joke around
Okay, so at this point, wow, a lot has happened.
me.
He has dangled marriage in front of you, which I
Right.
think that's something with us, like Black women. We're so attacked, and it's like
Yeah.
everywhere we turn, we're told that we're not desirable, or we're told that we're not going to get married, or it just all these crazy, unrealistic things.
Right.
So I'm wondering, did you tell him about this? I wonder if he played on it, or how did he know? Did you ever voice your
I
concern about marriage or anything like that, or being Black in America, being single mom?
um I don't think he cared as much about my being Black in America. I know at one point, when we first met, he used to say that he always wanted to meet a Black American woman because he had seen all these like rap videos, and he was a big Public Enemy and all this kind of thing. So he wanted like a certain type of Black woman from America. Now, mind you, the other woman that he had the child with, she was Black and Chinese, and she was from Suriname, and he never married her at that point. So I think he picked up maybe that Black women have an insecurity about, or need to be married, or someone to acknowledge that you are a couple, that having someone with you, acknowledging that you're worthwhile to have a relationship with, that that's important. Um, yeah, it's, there are a lot of things now in retrospect, because fortunately, there's been time, and I've gone through therapy to examine some of the things that were going on, because I always used to think initially, well, I had to do whatever it took to get married. So I take full accountability, like in the beginning, of trying to be whatever it was that he wanted, and ignoring my red flags to, because I want to be married. I need to give my son a dad. I need to give him a father. But taking ownership in that, but also realizing that there were things that, when you're susceptible, you're open to being mentally abused. It's something that's built up throughout your life. I think definitely in my case, it was built up from, I would say, childhood on. I love my parents dearly. They've both since passed away, but I think many ways in which they raised us, um, really sheltered and protected, and even love my dad. I always have to say I love my dad, but my dad was a little bit of a colorist, so very disappointed. So um, even the options that they presented to me, like my mother telling me things like, if you want a man, if you want to get married, you're going to have to tone down that intelligence thing. They don't like when you're smarter than they are. You need to say whatever is necessary for them to like you. You need to learn how to like cook more, make sure you show. you're really trying to impress a guy, cook something for him, don't smile at everything he says, laugh at all his jokes, because all that other stuff no one cares about if you're trying to get married. But in retrospect, I realize the sort of person that you should be with would appreciate that. If you're trying to create yourself to turn into the person that whoever you think only wants you, then yeah, that you're not doing yourself a service. You're wasting time.
So, all right. So thus far, you did get marriage out of this man, but you had to give up your literal citizenship
Yes.
in order for you to get the marriage. And he
Mhm.
played on that. It was a complete, I mean, from isolation to humiliation. We've
Mhm.
heard some verbal abuse. Where do things go from here? What is your daily life like living with him? And
Mhm.
what does your support system look like? I guess I asked like a lot of
Ah.
questions. But yes, just tell me a little bit more about how things are
Oh
and where they
wow.
go.
Okay, so my daily life is so we had three kids. Of course, I had my stepdaughter and my two sons. My daily life was working and then coming home. And he, of course, still had his interests. So he had his vacations. He always had a vacation a ski vacation he took to Austria by himself. Then we had a family vacation. And for a period of, let's see, Stephen was 4. So for 4 years, I wasn't allowed to return back to the US because he's like, we have a family here now. You're Dutch, you're not American, so you don't need to go back there to those people. So, mind you, my father is in his 80s at this point. My mother has health problems. I have a sister that lived in, actually, at that point, she was in Pontiac, Michigan, who had never seen um, her new nephew. So she came out at one point to see her new nephew, as well as, her oldest nephew, because I wasn't allowed to go back to the States. And the daily life, unfortunately, I didn't really have a support system. I was very depressed. I ate a lot. I probably gained about 100 pounds, just being miserable. Um, I Anytime that I would go around his family, I had to expect that they were going to say things about either my physical appearance, my being from the US, feeling like they were looking down at me continually. Um, and particularly, they would bring his ex girlfriend, the mother of his daughter, around and say things to her while I was there. It was as if the whole family was in on it. They were also not very kind at all to my oldest son, who has autism. He's on the spectrum, and initially he was like, "Oh, he just needs more a strong hand in his life. You're just coddling him. He's not autistic." But he ended up going through special education and everything. It was so bad that when he went to the school and he had just, I wouldn't say just arrived there, he was learning to speak Dutch and he was learning how to write his name. And he's 4 years old. And he asked the teacher how to write stombo, which means stupid. And the teacher's like, "Why do you need to write stumbo?" "Yeah, that's my name because that's what my dad calls me all the time." Um, yeah, it would get to the point that when I would go to work, um, people, I guess they noticed that either I seemed rather depressed or I was isolated. They would ask me what's going on at my house. I'm like, "Oh, nothing." I finally met a friend named Debbie, who I'm still friends with today. That I met her at a language class, or when we were perfecting our Dutch, and she just came out and asked, "Are you being abused or anything?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. Physically, like my son's being hit and everything." And she's like, "No, but are you?" Because I guess she had been through something like this. And she insisted on she was going to come and visit me at my house and everything. I'm like, I don't. well, it'll be too stressful if you're there. It's like, no, I'm going to keep coming over. So she really became my support system. And I finally got enough strength after almost, I'd say, 10 years to start inviting people over and them, other Dutch people telling me that, this guy that you're with, this man you're married to, he's not a normal Dutch person. Because at first I'm like, well, this is what men are like. And then they're like, this is not what a marriage is supposed to be like. And just finally opening up. But initially, there was a lot of isolation. And, I'm in a foreign country with by myself, no one really to watch my kids. So I don't really have, a support system to help there, even with an escape. My escape was really like going to work and speaking to people. Um, and then finally, going to see it's called a house art. So your regular doctor there. And when he told me that you have Stockholm syndrome and PTSD, I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't have all of that. It's like, there's something seriously wrong with you. You don't understand and what's happening to you. And yeah, so later on, I did develop that system, but initially I didn't. Because you also have to realize all of the friends that I had initially were all his friends. So they, just supported the things that he was doing. So, like with me, it was more mental abuse. With my oldest son, it was physical to the point. There was this, well, there were two like really major incidents where we were at a meal at his parents' house and he just busted in, like punched um, my oldest son and his mother, who since passed, but she had said, "Oh, you really shouldn't do that now. You shouldn't do it that hard." And I was like, "You shouldn't do that at all." But realizing I was stuck in this environment where they just co-signed all these things. I mean, I will say that there were times that at least his brother, because he's a twin, his brother was kind to my my oldest son and did have moments where he was kind to me, but the rest of the family, it was I think that's also part of the problem because I had met him online. I wasn't really able to vet him. I don't know why he really chose someone like me. I didn't know his friends. I only knew them afterwards. And there's one thing that I do also need to mention. I said that I had an opportunity to leave him. That was I was pregnant with our youngest son, and my oldest son had just come back from school and he's 4 years old at this time and I'm highly pregnant, and my ex-husband used to have this coin collection and my son went, and I guess he thought all the coins looked the same. He took one of the coins and said, I'm going to go get a bag of fries because, mind you, I'm not working, we're hungry. He goes to work, leave there, and I want to go and get a bag of French fries. And there, I guess at that age, kids run to and the fry store was really close. And I went, okay, fine, get some French fries. He went, he bought some fries. My ex-husband came home. He was furious because he said the owner of the fry store was his friend. That was the other thing. I felt like everyone knew him, had called him to say that this little black boy came in and paid um, for these fries with a coin that he knew was his. So he came home. He started wailing on my son. He pushed me, and I'm pregnant, mind you, at this point. And I called 112, so that's like 911, for the Dutch police to show up because I'm like, you're not gonna touch me. And then I called them. He went outside. He said something to them. He came back upstairs and said, well, I talked to them, so they're not going to believe you. They'll think that you're crazy. And then they just left. They never came to speak to me, didn't speak to nothing. They just left. At that point, I'm like, what did I get myself into? He went to work. I called the US Embassy, explained to them what had happened. they had a ticket waiting for me so that was like on a Thursday. They said, we'll get you out. We'll leave a ticket at the KLM desk for you and your son. We'll just need to stamp your passport one direction. Because like, I have no money to even get out of here.
We
So,
have to clarify. I don't know if everyone knows that KLM is an airline.
oh
Just,
yes,
just making sure that everyone
that's
knows
true.
KLM. So they were going to have
KLM
a
is
ticket for you at this particular airline.
right
Okay.
to go, but and they told me, what city do you want to return to in the U.S. And I was like, just send me back to New Orleans because I thought my mom was still there. So that was on a Saturday. So I had to sit there for 2 days with him coming back, knowing that I was leaving. And then I told him that, look, I'm leaving on that Friday. You need to bring me to the airport, or I'll just get on the um, the subway to the airport. So he was like, fine, whatever. And but that day he made me go to all of his friends. He brought me to all his friends to say, she's leaving. Tell them that you're leaving me. So first I had to go to his friend Martin, tell her that, or tell him that you're leaving me. I'm like, why am I doing, why did I need to go and tell them that I was leaving? And I'm pregnant, mind you, at this point. I'm like 6 months pregnant. And he drove me to the airport. And then he said something about, you're just going to be a statistic, a single mother with 2 kids. And that's when I started crying, realizing, oh my God, I'm going back to New Orleans as a single mom with 2 kids, no job, no money. And I said, well, can I at least stay here until your son is, well, not son, child, because I didn't know it was going to be a boy at that point, until your child is born. So it turned into, with him like playing this Bengali game with me of, oh, you're going to be, of me begging him to stay because like, you have nowhere to go. You're going to be on the streets in New Orleans with, and this is before Katrina had happened and everything, but still, the and to this day I regret ever doing that. I should have gotten on that plane and just left him, but I it was just all this. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be raising these kids alone. He's telling me I'm stupid. No one would want me anyway. You're ugly. You have 2 kids. You're a single mom. So I ended up going back. And, when you do something like that, of course, because they know that you've already lowered yourself to do that, that's why they take it just a little higher. That's why I had to give up the citizenship. Just, it was a constant showing how desperate you are to be with me while I'm mentally abusing you to the point that you start to believe everything that they're saying, that there's no one that would want me. I'm worthless. I'm nothing. And
Yeah.
then I'm coming back. And so I've said all this to his friends. And then the friends also get to know that, oh, wow, she's so worthless and nothing. She said she was leaving, but look, she's back because she knows she can't do better than this guy.
So this is wow. So I don't know if people are familiar with this term, but this is devaluing. So from oh wow, and a lot of abusers will do this, and I don't think a lot of us recognize it, but the constant put downs, telling you that no one's going to want you, saying that, oh, well, you're just going to be another statistic. All of that is bringing down your self esteem. And
Mm-hmm.
he played this, on purpose so that you would stay. He tried to make you feel guilty by forcing you to tell, his friends that you were leaving. And then he
Mm-hmm.
pulls the whole, you're just another statistic card. I've seen
Right.
this so many times, and it's so common in relationships. They'll have you
Mm-hmm.
thinking that you really can't do anything else. So they make you think terrible about yourself. And we
Right.
underestimate how important, your partner speaking positive to you is. We underestimate that. And
Right. And it
wow.
happened so fast. That's the crazy thing, that it felt like, I mean, it started probably the first day that we went out with
Mm,
me having my wallet stolen and all that. It just, and the next thing you know, you think you are worthless. And that's why I was eating so much, because that was the only time that I felt like I can feel good, because the minute that I open my mouth, he's going to say something. And of course, with speaking another language, he would say things like, "Oh, your Dutch is so terrible," and "You sound like an idiot when you speak Dutch." And I'd be like, "Well, I speak English pretty well."
Right.
So,
So
yeah.
getting back to where we were, because I know that we jumped a little bit
Oh,
back.
yes.
You ended up meeting someone named Debbie.
Hmm.
Was she, because that was your support system. So I want to know a
Yes.
little bit about your support system. You mentioned
Hmm.
Debbie, but
Yeah.
did you have other friends? I know that you mentioned
Hmm.
that there were people who were from the Netherlands, like, nah, this is weird. Like, this is not how we do things. Did
Yes.
you find a lot of people that were supportive? And what did that look like? Did it help you to leave that relationship?
Eventually, it helped me to leave the relationship. In the beginning, when I would meet people like that, I would detach from them, because I felt like, oh my gosh, they know my secret. So I don't want to speak to them anymore. But through having the friendships with like Debbie, there were a couple of people from work, um, that I was able to get strong enough to realize this isn't how I want to end my life. Um, there were a lot of things going on. So I'd say a year before I finally left him, there was an incident with my oldest son where he threw him down a flight of stairs, and the school called, because I wasn't at home, I was at work teaching. And the school where my oldest son went to school, they called, and he was 16, almost 16 at the time. And I remember he's autistic. They called to say that you either call the police or we're calling the police, because by now I can speak Dutch well, um, because your husband has clearly abused your son. So I ended up calling the police, and he ended up having to go to court ordered domestic violence treatment, and he was furious. He was horrible that year. I ended up having to send my oldest son to live with my mother in Las Vegas, because he just couldn't stand looking at him. He said things like he hated having a black man in his house, all kinds of so my son goes away, but then he goes back to his pullback punching with me. He's angry with me that we could have dealt with this here, and you ended up. So he starts amping up other the mental abuse and everything. Um, and so it got to a point where finally, because of that support system, and finally being able to speak to my family again, and realizing that I can't end my life this way, looking at our youngest son and thinking, when he turns 18 and he's off to do his own thing, I'm going to be stuck with this man who brings his friends in to laugh at me, is telling me I'm worthless, I'm ugly. He at one point he had a colleague who had told him that I was attractive or something. And he came back home laughing at, how could this man think that he must be crazy to think that you're good looking. And was just, I can't stay with this. And finally, I ended up literally just leaving him. I told him I was going on vacation to see my family, and I'm going without you. And because you go on your ski vacation without me, I'm going on this vacation without you. And I ended up going, and I did not go back. I said, I'm not going back. We can figure out what to do with our youngest son in terms of, but, because I left, we had
Yes.
I mean, we had a lovely house that I walked away from. And that was the other thing that, so I include in mental abuse, I also like to include like financial abuse,
Oh, yes.
because he controlled the purse strings. And then finally, when afterwards, I'm like, I'm working full time too. This money is also mine. I started spending on things for myself, like seeing my family, seeing my 80-year-old dad. I'm going to go and see him. So then he was like, well, this is negatively impacting the family. You're just spending money. I'm like, I've been with you like 5 years of not spending a dime because you're controlling where we go on vacation, who I can call, what bills we pay. And then finally, like, look, I'm just paying, I don't care anymore. I'm going to do what I need to do. I work
Yes.
too. The only sad thing, when I left, I ended up walking away from the house that we had together because I figured he wasn't going to. We tried even at one point going to like marriage counseling,
Oh,
and he would sit there and say, I'm not leaving with her. I'm not going to, like, can we go, to see my parents and all that? I'm not going to go and do that. Okay, so you're just saying you're not going to do any of these things. And so where does that lead us? And well, you're just going to have to do what you need to do. So I figured he just, at some point, he wanted me to leave, and I left.
so I'm smiling pretty hard because, like, oh my God, I love what you just said. So, oh my goodness. So you said that you told him you were going to visit the family and then you just didn't go back.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes. Like, I love that for you. Like that. Oh my goodness. People that are not in these kinds of relationships don't
Hmm.
understand. It's so hard to walk away. I mean, you
Yes.
left the house behind and whatever finances. I
Yeah.
look, I applaud you because that's amazing that you were able to, make that decision and just
Hmm.
go. There was no chance for him to try to guilt you or try
Hmm.
to coerce you to stay. I love it. That's amazing. I do have another
Yeah.
question, and then
Okay.
I have two more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Um,
Okay.
so at the beginning of the story, you told us that there was a man. What is his name was Christopher, and
Yes.
you told us there was a man named Christopher who was at the embassy, and he asked if you
Yes.
were giving up your citizenship over duress. Did that end up
Mhm.
helping you when you told him?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. So I would say 12 years into the marriage, and where I'm miserable, I'm gaining weight. He's telling me that I'm worthless. There was this one day where he had brought in one of his colleagues who was laughing at me because, well, I believe in God. And his colleague was like, oh, she's so stupid. She believes in God. And they were sitting and laughing. And I'm like, I can't do this forever. So I called the embassy and I asked, because at this point I'm a Dutch citizen. I made an appointment to get a visa to go to the US. And then I told them that, look, I gave my citizenship up and I'm trying, can I get it back? And luckily, they looked at the file. And because Christopher had written that this woman says she's doing this under duress, if she comes back, um, send a letter to the State Department, send this letter from me and include it in her reapplication file. So because he did that, and I think it's a Christopher Degnet, so I need to find him one day and thank him for that because he did that. I mean, it took about a year process, but I was able to get my US citizenship back. And once I got that back, and that was funny how I told my ex, because this is after I've sent my oldest son to live with my mom. And he's, of course, thinking that, oh, well, that means you'll never see him again because you're not an American citizen. You need to get, a visa to go and see him. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to go see him because I got my citizenship. I just mentioned casually, yeah, I'm still a US citizen. And he's like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, I'm a US citizen again.
Oh
It's
my
like, oh, well,
goodness.
you lied to me. You said you'd given it up. Like, oh, I did give it up, but I just got it back. So,
That's good. I mean, that you know what? That's not something that I like to think of myself as a traveler too. Like
mhm,
I didn't live in the Netherlands, but I have been to Amsterdam and I've
mhm,
been around to various countries and that's not something that I knew. So
mhm,
maybe someone listening might find that to be helpful if you are in a situation where
yes.
you might need to temporarily give up your citizenship or you're
Mhm,
being forced to. have them make a note of it. That's wow. I'm glad that
Right.
you were able to get your citizenship back like
Yes.
that. That's pretty cool. So, I just have one other question. I like
Okay.
to end these episodes by asking, what kind of advice do you have for other Black women in mentally abusive relationships, or even, with family members or a romantic relationship or whatever
Mhm.
the case? What kind of words of wisdom do you have?
Value yourself first. Work on your self love before you try and find love elsewhere. Because, like, even my relationship with him was reactionary because I didn't mention, but before I was engaged to a Black man like me who, his family told me that they wanted me to have a surrogate because they did not need, they liked him as a person, thought I was intelligent, but I was too dark to have a child with him,
Mm.
and that was going to ruin the family line and all this, and they didn't
Hmm.
do all they did to get a certain color to have me come and mess it up. So I fortunately broke up with him, but because of that I thought, well, I'll just go out with someone white so that won't be a consideration because he knows I'm black.
Oh, geez.
I should have worked on myself first before, because you just get the same person in a different package.
You know what I call them? I call them powdered donut dusties.
Yes, I got a powdered, I married a powdered donut
You know where I
Dusty.
got that from. But yeah.
Also, vet people. If you're going to meet someone online, try your best to vet them, um, particularly if they're in another country or state, because you aren't around. They're showing you their best self
Mhm.
initially.
Mhm.
Get to know their friend circle, get to know who they are, and stop listening to statistics and data in terms of Black women, because it's meant to put us down. Had I, like I said, I was obsessed with, I had to be married before 30. That's how I got into a situation like this where I could accept everything. So make sure, love yourself. You are amazing, and love yourself, vet people, and yeah, vet the powdered donuts too.
Yes. Hopefully it's not a powdered donut dusty, but yeah. I'm so glad that you came on today. Thank you so much, Trisha Diamond. It's been a pleasure, like, hearing more of your story, and then that ending was everything. I love that
Oh,
you
thank you.
walked away with confidence, and you've been able to pull yourself together, and now you are happy and
Good.
successful. You have beautiful skin, everything.
Oh,
So
thank you. Oh, one last thing. If you have Black daughters, tell them they are beautiful and intelligent. Two of the
yes.
things, because that was something my parents never. My mom thought that she shouldn't. That looks go away, so I'll never say anything about your looks. So I won't give you compliments. But it's important.
Mhm.
Build up that self-esteem. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on today, Trisha
you.
Diamond. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Also, if you are a Black woman with a story of mental abuse to share, or if you are a Black woman in the mental health field, reach out to us to be featured on the show at samatogethernow@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at Sama Together Now, and you can also find us on Facebook at Sisters Against Mental Abuse. Thanks for listening, and remember, mental abuse is abuse.